He says he loves her, and maybe he really does. But one night, with the weight of his own unspoken loneliness pressing on his chest, he crosses a line he swore he never would. And afterward, he's as confused as she is. Because how do you explain betraying someone you still want to come home to? How do you reconcile wanting stability with chasing chaos? It's not always about sex. Sometimes it's about something far more disturbing. Something that has nothing to do with her and everything to do with the man staring at himself in the mirror afterward, asking quietly, "What the hell is wrong with me?" Esther Perel doesn't see infidelity as merely the failure of love. She sees it as an act of searching not for a new partner, but for a new self. Men, especially, are trained to believe that once they have the house, the woman, the children, and the job, they should feel complete. But what no one tells them is that identity isn't static, it decays when ignored. And often, infidelity isn't the death of love, it's the scream of a man suffocating under the weight of everything he thought would make him feel alive. It's less about her and more about him, his fading sense of aliveness, masculinity, and relevance. He still kisses her in the morning, he still laughs at her jokes, he still wants her, wants to protect her. But then comes a moment, subtle, quiet, when someone else looks at him and doesn't see a father, a provider, a partner. They see a man. Not a role, not a function, just a man. And that gaze becomes intoxicating, not because he stopped loving his woman, but because he stopped recognizing himself in the mirror. And that fleeting moment of being seen again, of being desired outside the boundaries of responsibility, something ancient inside him wakes up. Something wild, something selfish, something that doesn't ask for permission. This isn't justification, this is dissection. Most men who cheat aren't looking to leave. They're looking to reconnect with a version of themselves they lost, the one that wasn't tired all the time, the one who felt dangerous, the one who didn't feel like a paycheck and a promise. It's not fair, it's not noble, but it's real. They aren't running from their partner, they're running from their own emotional stagnation. They say, "I don't know why I did it." And they mean it because it wasn't rational, it was emotional, it was impulsive, it was desperate. Society teaches men to earn their worth through control of their urges, their finances, their futures. But in trying to master everything, they often lose connection with themselves. And when that control starts to slip, when stress mounts, when years pass without anyone asking how they feel, cheating becomes a tragic attempt at liberation. Not from their relationship, but from the identity they feel trapped in. A man can deeply love his partner and still feel emotionally homeless, and that ache, left unnamed and untreated, becomes a silent predator that feeds on opportunity. Esther Perel's work points us to the uncomfortable truth that love and desire do not always coexist peacefully. Love wants closeness, predictability, safety. Desire wants space, risk, mystery. And when those two forces begin to suffocate each other, men often don't have the language or the courage to say they're drowning. So instead they act. They search, not for a better partner, but for a version of themselves they lost while trying to be everything for someone else. But here's the kicker. It's not always about lack. Sometimes he cheats not because something's missing, but because everything is so full, so perfect, so pressurized that he doesn't know where to put his own restlessness. He doesn't know how to ask for more without seeming ungrateful. He doesn't know how to say, "I love you, but I'm disappearing inside my own life." So he becomes a stranger to himself in the dark, hoping that maybe a stranger's touch can pull him back into his own skin.
And so the betrayal lands like a bomb, shattering not just trust, but identity. She looks at him and sees a liar. He looks at himself and sees someone he doesn't recognize. And the truth is, he didn't expect this either. He thought he could carry it, thought it would stay secret, compartmentalized, like a bruise under clothing. But now it's out, and nothing feels safe. She cries, and he wants to comfort her, but the irony is grotesque. How do you console someone you've destroyed? And worse, how do you explain that you didn't cheat because she wasn't enough, but because you weren't? This is the paradox Esther Perel lays bare, that betrayal isn't always born from dissatisfaction. Sometimes it comes from a longing for vitality, from the aching desire to feel like a man again when life is slowly chipped away at every part of that identity. For many men, the act of cheating isn't about conquest, it's about resurrection. They're not trying to discard their life, but to feel alive within it. And in the fallout, they realize just how poorly equipped they are to handle emotions that go deeper than anger or hunger. They never learned how to sit with loneliness without numbing it, never learned how to feel invisible without trying to be desired again. Because what do we tell boys when they're hurting? Be strong, push through, don't make it a big deal. We teach them to avoid shame at all costs, and cheating becomes the ultimate paradox, an attempt to escape shame that only leads to more of it. He thought it would free him. Instead, it imprisoned him in a new kind of silence. A silence where everything he says sounds like a lie, even when it's not. A silence where his apologies ring hollow, because the damage already redefined him. But here's what we miss if we reduce infidelity to simply, he's a bad person. We ignore the system that raised him. We ignore the emotional poverty that man lived in. We ignore the fact that many men cheat not because they lack love, but because they lack a mirror. They don't know who they are anymore, and they've been trained to find meaning through admiration, through performance, through being wanted. In the absence of inner clarity, desire from the outside becomes their compass. And it's easy to lose yourself when your worth is measured only in how others respond to you. That doesn't make it right, it just makes it human. And if we don't understand the psychology of this betrayal, we keep repeating the same cycle. Moral outrage followed by silence. But understanding doesn't mean condoning. It means creating space for real accountability. Not just, I'm sorry, but here's what I've been running from. Not just tears, but truth. Because the real work isn't in fixing the relationship, it's in unearthing the man beneath the mask. The man who didn't know how to say he was hurting. The man who thought being a good provider was the same as being known. To heal after cheating, both people must walk through fire. She must confront the sting of betrayal. He must confront the question, who am I without the chase? And maybe in that reckoning, something new can be born. A relationship not based on performance, but on presence, on honesty that's raw, even when it's ugly, on desire that isn't fed by fear, but by freedom. Not everyone will make it through that fire, but for those who do, there is often a deeper intimacy waiting, one that doesn't ask for perfection, but asks instead for truth. And if he's willing to do that work, not just win her back, but find himself, then maybe the infidelity becomes something else, not just an end, but a threshold, a portal, a mirror, one that forces him to become the man he thought he needed someone else to make him feel like. One who doesn't just look strong, but actually is. Because now, finally, he knows who he is.
This is where the real war begins, not with her, but within him. The man who cheated, who shattered something sacred, now stands alone with the wreckage and the truth. If he doesn't confront the emptiness that drove him into someone else's arms, he'll do it again. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not with the same woman, but again. Because this wasn't just a mistake, it was a symptom, a flare-up of an infection he's been carrying since boyhood. The infection of silence, of swallowed need, of being told that to be a man is to be stoic, self-sufficient, immune to softness. So he learned to numb, learned to achieve instead of feel, learned to provide instead of connect. And when the mask began to crack, when the performances stopped feeding him, he didn't ask for help, he ran. Esther Perel says that in the aftermath of an affair, the question isn't just, can we rebuild trust, but can we reinvent this relationship into something more honest than it ever was? That begins with the man asking himself why he believed he had no other way, why vulnerability felt so much more dangerous than betrayal, why he didn't feel worthy of his own emotional life until a stranger temporarily handed it back to him. And it's in those questions, not the sex, not the secrecy, but the hunger beneath it all, that the deepest work begins. If he's honest, brutally so, he may realize that he never learned to love without losing himself, that he kept trying to earn worth through sacrifice and success, and eventually felt robbed of identity, not by his partner,
but by the way he lived inside the relationship. He stopped showing up as a man and started showing up as a role. A father, a protector, a listener, but not himself. And the woman he cheated on, she may have loved him completely, but you can't love someone into self-acceptance. Especially not a man who's been taught that asking for emotional nourishment is weakness. So what does healing look like? It looks like him going back, not to the affair, but to the moment before it, to the moment he started hiding, to the moment he stopped telling the truth about what he needed, who he was, and what he feared. It means confronting the wound, not just the damage it caused. It means learning to speak before he suffocates, to cry before he implodes, to say, "I'm scared," without needing a crisis to justify it. Because real masculinity isn't the absence of weakness. It's the courage to name your wounds before they bleed onto someone else. It also means learning how to love differently. Less like a duty, more like a dance. Less like protection, more like presence. Because so many men are conditioned to express love by doing things. Fixing things, paying bills, staying loyal in form, even when emotionally absent in substance. But relationships, as Perel teaches, are not maintained by performance. They thrive on aliveness, on two people who can evolve side by side without clinging to outdated versions of themselves. And that requires risk, not of cheating, but of honesty. Risking being seen, risking being rejected, risking not being the perfect man, but a real one. The irony is, many men only find this kind of truth after the betrayal. Because only in the fire are they forced to strip away the armor. Only in the aftermath do they realize what they were protecting all along. Not themselves, but the boy inside who was never taught how to live without applause. The boy who equated being needed with being wanted, who thought intimacy was something to earn, not something to receive. Healing after infidelity doesn't mean things go back to how they were. They can't, and they shouldn't. It means building something new, something braver. A relationship where both people tell the truth sooner. Where desire isn't something you chase in the dark, but something you cultivate in the light. Where he no longer feels like he has to escape to feel seen. Because in the end, love is not a prison. But for a man who doesn't know himself, it can feel like one. The affair, as damaging as it is, was a jailbreak, but it wasn't freedom. It was panic. And now, in the silence that follows, he has a choice. To keep running, or to turn inward. To keep acting, or to finally become real. That's the true test, not of loyalty, but of manhood. Not whether he never stumbles, but whether he's willing to stop pretending. To come home, not just to her, but to himself.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.